"Don't be scared, George," my stepdad said softly to my ear. "You're safe." Then he touched me. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't push. I didn't know how. My limbs forgot they belonged to me. My voice vanished into my throat. He pressed me backward onto the bed. The laptop slid to the floor. My mind screamed, but my mouth couldn't. "No," I finally whispered, tears already spilling. "Please don't. Don't do this to me." But he didn't stop. He didn't stop. I don't know how long I lay there after it was over. The door closed behind him with a click. Not a slam. Not guilt. Just calm. My body trembled. My legs curled into my chest. I didn't cry loudly, just soft, sharp sobs into the pillow. There was blood. There was shame. There was silence. My stepdad just took advantage of me. Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, do well to subscribe and hit on notifications. To all my returning subscribers, thank you for always watching my videos. I never liked flying, but there was something worse than turbulence at 30,000 feet, coming home. It had been nearly a year since I last visited my mother's place in New York. Between classes, internships, and the excuse of being busy, I kept my distance. Not because I didn't love her. I did in my own complicated way. But because that house had stopped feeling like home the moment she married George. George Richards. Business mogul. Smooth-talking, Rolex-wearing, six-figure smiling George. He came into our lives like a tidal wave when I was 16. Sweeping my mother off her feet. Filling the fridge with imported wines. Replacing our worn-out couch with something too white and expensive to sit on. Within a year he'd proposed. A year later they had a son. My little half-brother Marcus. Now I was 21, a junior in college, and already felt like I didn't belong in any version of the family photo. The cab pulled into the driveway just after dark. The house looked the same. Tall brick walls, a silver gate that responded to a code George had programmed himself, and warm lights glowing behind large glass windows. The smell of cedar hit me the second I stepped out. George loved expensive wood. The door opened before I could knock. "Lillian." Mom wrapped me in one of her dramatic hugs. She still smelled like cinnamon and rose water. "My God, look at you. You've lost weight. Are you eating?" I smiled tiredly and nodded. "I'm good, Mom. Just a long ride." George stood behind her in the hallway. He smiled wide and white. "Look who's all grown up." I forced a polite smile and stepped forward. "Hey, George." He leaned in for a hug, his hand resting on the small of my back longer than it needed to. I froze for half a second. Maybe it was just his way. Maybe I was tired. But something about his touch felt rehearsed, not warm, just calculated. The rest of the evening was uneventful. Marcus was already asleep. Mom reheated dinner and talked nonstop about her yoga class, her skincare routine, and George's new project. A tech merger happening somewhere in Silicon Valley. I nodded, smiled, made the occasional "oh wow." But inside I felt hollow. Like I was watching someone else's life from behind glass. Later, as I stood in the guest room, my old room now turned minimalist and cold, I stared at myself in the mirror. The reflection stared back. A woman trying to feel like a daughter again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just a guest here. George knocked once before poking his head in. "Everything okay in here?" I turned surprised. "Yeah, just settling in." He stepped inside anyway. "Need help with anything?" I shook my head. "No, imukai." He smiled and looked around the room, his eyes pausing on the bed, the desk, then me. "Well, if you need anything, homework help, tech issues, whatever, just ask. I know college isn't easy." I nodded, hoping he'd leave. "Good night, Lillian," he said with a lingering tone. Then he left. I stood there for a long time after, the hairs on my arms standing without reason. The next morning was brighter. The sunlight poured in through sheer curtains. Marcus ran into my room giggling, throwing his tiny arms around my waist. For a moment everything felt pure. I hugged him tight. Downstairs, Mom was already dressed, headed out to meet a friend for brunch. George was working from home, or so he said. As the day passed, I started to feel like maybe I was imagining things. George was distant, polite, professional. Maybe I was being unfair. Maybe I was carrying teenage resentment too far. Maybe, just maybe, he really was trying to be a good stepfather. But then he watched me again at dinner. Not in a fatherly way. It was subtle. A glance too long. A smirk that didn't belong. When I stood up to clear my plate, his eyes followed the curve of my back. I could feel it. And suddenly, that old feeling returned. The one I used to have when I was 15 and older men stared too long on the subway. That feeling of being seen but not as a person. Seen as something else. I went upstairs early that night saying I had reading to catch up on. But I didn't read. I sat in bed staring at the door, wondering if he'd knock again. Wondering if this time he'd come in anyway. It was just after 10 p.m. I had been staring at my laptop screen for nearly an hour, trying to make sense of a spreadsheet for a business analytics course I was barely passing. Numbers blurred. My brain was fog. I had forgotten how quiet the house could get at night. No traffic, no city sounds. Just the soft hum of the air vents and the occasional creak of floorboards. Then came the knock. A soft, almost polite tap on the door. Lillian. George's voice low and casual. Still awake. I hesitated. Yeah. He opened the door slightly, holding a glass of water. Everything okay? Yeah, I said again, avoiding eye contact. Just trying to finish this assignment. He stepped in, closing the door behind him. Need a hand? I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But I was tired, overwhelmed, and I didn't want to make a scene out of something that maybe, just maybe, wasn't anything. Sure, I said quietly. He pulled up the desk chair beside me and leaned in, scanning the screen. This is basic projection modeling, he said, pointing to a column. Your formula's a little off here. You're not accounting for the margin in Q3. He spoke like a teacher. Confident. Calm. Like someone who had helped people 1,000 times before. I nodded slowly, taking mental notes as he explained. But even as I focused on his words, I couldn't ignore the feeling of his arm brushing against mine. Not once, but again. And again. A little too long. A little too close. Then his hand rested on my back. See, he said. You're smarter than you think. I flinched. My body stiffened. His fingers didn't move. I stood up suddenly. I think I get it now. I'll finish it later. He didn't move right away. He just looked at me. Studied me. There was a silence, and in it I heard the shift. Like something in the air had cracked. Lillian, he said quietly, you've grown into a beautiful woman. My stomach twisted. George, I began. But he stood, and in 2 slow steps he closed the gap between us. Don't be scared, he said softly. You're safe. Then he touched me. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't push. I didn't know how. My limbs forgot they belonged to me. My voice vanished into my throat. He pressed me backward onto the bed. The laptop slid to the floor. My mind screamed, but my mouth couldn't. No, I finally whispered, tears already spilling. Please don't. But he didn't stop. He didn't stop. I don't know how long I lay there after it was over. The door closed behind him with a click. Not a slam. Not guilt. Just calm. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. My body trembled. My legs curled into my chest. I didn't cry loudly, just soft, sharp sobs into the pillow. There was blood. There was shame. There was silence. And I couldn't understand how one moment, one terrible, awful moment, could change everything I thought I knew about this family, this house, this man. About myself. I wasn't a child, but I wasn't prepared for this. No one ever is. I wanted to disappear. Vanish. Be anywhere but here. But the walls stayed the same. The room stayed the same. Only I was different now. Broken. And alone. The morning didn't care what had happened the night before. The sun rose anyway. The birds chirped outside like nothing had cracked open inside me. I heard the clink of dishes downstairs and my mother's voice calling up, Lillian, breakfast. I couldn't move. I was still lying in bed, knees pulled to my chest, wearing the same clothes from the night before. My whole body felt like it didn't belong to me. Bruised in places you couldn't see, numb in places I didn't know could go numb. I hadn't slept. I don't even remember blinking, just staring into the soft glow of the morning light as it poured through the sheer curtains. I thought maybe I'd wake up, and it would have been a nightmare. But I didn't. And it wasn't. I sat up slowly, every muscle stiff, aching. I moved to the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. Part of me wanted to scream, to run, to find my mother and tell her everything. But I didn't. Because as soon as I pictured her face, warm, trusting, full of love for the man who just shattered me, I crumbled. What would she say? Would she believe me? Would she ask what I was wearing? Why I didn't scream? Why I didn't stop him? I didn't have answers. Just a storm inside me that didn't know where to go. I finally got dressed and went downstairs around 10. My legs felt like they were floating, detached, like I was watching myself from above, a stranger in my own body. Maria greeted me with a wide smile. There you are. I thought you were going to sleep all day. I forced a tiny smile and sat down. She had made pancakes and eggs, the way she used to on Sundays when I was little. George was at the table, dressed in his usual crisp shirt and tie, typing on his phone. He looked up briefly, offered a quiet, "Morning, Lillian," and went back to scrolling. Just like that. Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't taken something from me I could never get back. I looked at him for a moment, really looked. And for a second I saw it. Not shame. Not guilt. But control. Like he was daring me to say something. Like he knew I wouldn't. "Morning," I mumbled, barely above a whisper. I took a small bite of egg and nearly gagged. My stomach turned. The smell, the sight of food, everything made me sick. I pushed the plate away. "Not hungry?" Mom asked, her eyes warm and motherly. I shook my head. "Didn't sleep well." "Probably just adjusting to being home again," she said. "It always takes a day or two." Home. I almost laughed. But it came out like a cough. That day dragged like wet cloth through mud. George went into his office. My mom ran errands. I stayed upstairs, pretending to work on school stuff, but mostly just sitting in silence. I kept going to the bathroom, checking the mirror, looking for signs. A bruise. A mark. Something to prove I wasn't making it up. But there was nothing. Just my own reflection. Hollow-eyed. Haunted. I replayed it in my head again and again. The knock. His hand. My voice small, pleading. His weight. The door closing. Again. Again. Until I felt like I was losing pieces of myself every time it looped. I tried writing in my journal. Something I hadn't done since high school. I opened a blank page and just stared. Finally I wrote. I wish I could disappear. That night, I locked my door. I dragged a chair under the knob just in case. I didn't sleep, but I felt a tiny bit safer knowing he couldn't just walk in again. I thought about calling someone. A friend. A hotline. The police. But shame has a way of wrapping around your throat, quiet and tight. And fear has a voice louder than your own. By the third day, I told my mom I needed to get back to campus early. I lied and said I had a surprise exam. She hugged me, disappointed but supportive. George carried my suitcase to the cab. As he placed it in the trunk, he leaned in close. "You're smart to keep quiet," he said softly, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. "Let's not ruin your mother's life." I stared at him, my heart pounding. Rage curled in my chest like fire. But the words stayed stuck in my throat. I got in the cab. And I left. The city blurred outside the window as we pulled away. Tall buildings, people walking, horns blaring. All of it happening like the world didn't know what just happened to me. Like I was invisible. Like it didn't matter. But I mattered. Somewhere deep down I still believed that. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel brave. But I was alive. And that meant there was still time. Time to speak. Time to be heard. Back on campus, everything looked the same. The gray stone buildings. The students rushing to class with earbuds in. The smell of coffee and cigarette smoke hanging around the library steps. But I wasn't the same. I carried something inside me now, something heavy, sharp, and invisible. A silence that hurt more than any bruise ever could. The first few days I didn't talk to anyone unless I had to. I went to class, took notes I didn't understand, and nodded when professors spoke. At night I curled up in bed with the covers pulled to my chin, heart racing over nothing. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I didn't feel anything at all. I kept thinking, maybe if I pretend it didn't happen it'll go away. But it didn't. One morning 2 weeks after I returned, I was sitting on a bench outside the student union when my professor, Dr. Kendall, walked by. She taught psychology, tall, brown-skinned, always wearing big earrings and wide shoes that clacked when she walked. She paused when she saw me. "Lillian," she asked gently, "you okay?" I looked up too quickly and nodded. "Yeah, just tired." She tilted her head. "You sure?" I felt the pressure behind my eyes, sudden and sharp. I wanted to lie. I almost did. But my lips trembled. "No," I whispered. She sat down beside me. Not too close. Just enough to let me know she wasn't going anywhere. We sat in silence for a long time before I spoke. I didn't tell her everything at first. Just that something bad had happened. That I hadn't been able to sleep. That I felt like I was walking through water every day. She nodded through all of it, never rushing, never asking too much. Finally, she said, "You're not alone. Whatever happened, you don't have to carry it by yourself." She gave me the number of a campus counselor and asked if I wanted her to walk me there. I nodded. Therapy wasn't a magic fix. The first session, I didn't say anything for 15 minutes. Just sat there holding a cup of tea the counselor had offered, my fingers trembling. Then quietly I started talking. I told her about the night. About George. About the silence I'd been drowning in ever since. She didn't interrupt. She didn't doubt. She just listened. And when I was done, she said 6 words that hit me like sunlight after weeks of rain. "None of this is your fault." I broke down. Right there. In that room. For the first time I sobbed like the child I felt like. The pain came out in waves. The fear. The shame. The anger. All of it. And slowly I began to breathe again. A few days later I sat at my dorm desk with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. No laptop this time. No distractions. Just me. And the truth. I wrote a letter to my mother. "Dear Mom, I've wanted to tell you this since the day I left. But I didn't know how. I didn't know if you would believe me. Something happened. George hurt me. The night he came into my room to help with homework, he didn't stop when I told him to. I need you to know this not because I want to break our family, but because I can't carry this secret anymore. I don't want to be silent. I can't live in that silence. I hope you believe me. I hope you'll choose me. Your daughter, Lillian." I folded the letter, sealed it, sat with it in my hand for a long time, and then I placed it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to send it, but I had written it, and that was something. I still have days when I feel like the ground beneath me is cracking, when a sound or smell or memory brings it all rushing back. But I also have days when I feel okay, when I go to class and understand the lecture, when I laugh with a friend over coffee, when I wake up and don't feel afraid. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a slow climb and some days I slip. But I'm climbing. I'm speaking. I'm living. And George, he may have stolen a piece of me, but he doesn't get to keep it. Because I'm taking it back. Word by word. Step by step. I'm taking me back. Have you ever imagined yourself in this kind of situation? What did you do about it? Subscribe to this channel and hit on notifications for more interesting stories like this.